This was an interview Pushilin gave to Russia 24 television. He said, in the vicinity of Marinka and Avdiivka, the situation is consistently tense, but our units have the initiative. As for Marinka, we are registering a redeployment of reserves by the Ukrainian military, but it is still not as rapid as the advances we are registering in both the Marinka and Avdiivka areas, where earlier we also registered the redeployment of rather sizable reserves. Recently, this has marked the largest redeployment of reserves. So what Pushilin is saying is that Ukraine has rushed more troops to try to avert another collapse in the Avdiivka-Marinka areas, but the Russians still are advancing in both of these areas. About Avdiivka, I am sure he's right. I've seen maps. It does seem as if the Russians indeed are still advancing in and around Avdiivka. In fact, apparently they're on the outskirts of the town in several places. The situation around Avdiivka looks to me a little like what it looked like in Bakhmut in January, just to say, with the encirclement of Avdiivka having actually gone rather further than that. About Marinka, I have to say this, Pushilin has made so many claims at so many times about the place being captured that I'm afraid I no longer pay much attention to what he says about it. But anyway, no doubt lots of things going on the battlefronts, very heavy Russian missile strikes across Ukraine. But at the moment, today, the major fight has been in the information space, if you like, with the Ukrainians still trying to claim that the Battle of Bakhmut is ongoing, even as all of the evidence from the front lines, from Bakhmut itself, suggests otherwise, with some suggestions, in fact, that it is the Ukrainians who are pulling back from the areas adjoining Bakhmut, and that the Russians might be gradually considering a push towards Chasiv Yar. And for the rest, major missile strikes across Ukraine, and General Zaluzhny hiding, because that's what it looks to me to be. Now, what does that mean for the future? Well, President Biden met with President Zelensky at the G7 summit in Hiroshima in Japan and gave a press conference. And it struck me that President Biden, in rather clumsy words, appeared to concede that Bakhmut had indeed been captured by the Russians. He didn't quite say that, but he came very close. He made an astonishing claim that the Russians had suffered 100,000 men killed in the capture of Bakhmut. I have no idea where he got that number from. All I will say is that I think it is not just wrong, but absurd, and has no basis in reality. But anyway, that was what Biden said. But he also had some things to say about the Ukrainian offensive. He said that he knows the date, that he's not going to say what it is, when it's going to start. And he said that Ukraine has all the equipment that it needs for this offensive. Now, I've said that I don't think General Zaluzhny wants this offensive to happen. He's got deep misgivings about it. President Zelensky has postponed it repeatedly. I think that what has happened, and this is my own personal view, is that on arrival in Hiroshima, Zelensky was confronted by the Americans, by Biden and his team, and they made it absolutely clear to Zelensky that they're out of patience, that they don't want to hear anything more about how Ukraine needs more weapons before it starts this offensive. They want this offensive to take place now, and they're not going to tolerate any more postponements or delays. And I think that Zelensky, for his part, has promised Biden that this offensive will indeed take place, and he has indeed committed himself to launching this offensive on a particular date. That is my reading of President Biden's news conference. So we are going to see this Ukrainian offensive take place at some point, and I'm guessing it will be fairly soon, probably this month rather than next month. There's still, after all, 9 days left to May. So we shall probably see this offensive take place, and all of this redeployment of forces, troops being sent from Bakhmut north towards Kupiansk and those places, all of that could be connected in some way with this offensive. It could be that Ukraine is going to try and launch some kind of diversionary attack to pin down Russian forces in the north, with what's left of the Bakhmut grouping of Ukrainian troops, even as the main offensive, I think everybody now acknowledges, is going to take place in the south. And all the indications are that the principal, at least one of the principal targets of this offensive, will be the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant at Energoda. And I've noticed that Rafael Grossi, the CEO of the International Atomic Energy Agency, has come up with some suggestions for demilitarizing the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, given that the Russians believe that the primary purpose of this Ukrainian offensive, or at least its initial objective, will be to try to recapture this nuclear power plant. I am sure that the Russians will not agree to its demilitarization in the way that Grossi would like them to. They probably would see that as simply an invitation to the Ukrainians to walk in. So we're going to see the Ukrainian offensive in probably the next couple of days, probably this month, perhaps conceivably